Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Late April means plenty of playoffs, baseball's in full swing, and the NFL is back temporarily, as I'll detail all that's happening and then some, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe's JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now as we get set for another big weekend in both the NBA and NHL, full slate of games, both Saturday and Sunday, obviously a ton of games tonight and tomorrow. But the big picture as of right this very moment in both sports, I'll start off with the NBA, but to me, how I encapsulate this first segment is the NBA seems to be more intriguing than the NHL as far as their first round series goes, because with the NBA, you have 4 series that are at 1 game apiece, and in the NHL, you already have 5 series that are 2-love, where another series has yet to play a game 2 in Florida and Tampa, and they'll play game 2 tonight, where if the puck bounces a certain way, maybe Florida could go back to Sunrise in South Florida with a 2-0 series lead, which will leave you only 2 series at 1 apiece, which usually it's the other way around, where the NHL gets off to a flying start, where you may have a lot of series that are at 1 apiece or 2-1, as Dallas and Colorado are at this point. But the NBA, which usually is a slog in the first round, these games are spread out all over the place, and a lot of series are at 2-love, where you do have quite a few series that are in that state, and we'll touch on that. But to me, as I now tip off with the NBA, with these 4 series that are at 1 apiece, the storyline going into this weekend are which team are you concerned the most as far as maybe not getting out alive in this first round, whether it be the Knicks, whether it be the Nuggets. And I know the Nuggets and Clippers are splitting hairs because they're just about even, maybe a smidge to the Clippers considering how they ended their season, and they played well, and you have a healthy Kawhi Leonard to boot. Then you also have Golden State, where last night Houston got back on the beam and behind Jalen Green's 38 points, where you knew that there was going to be a bit of a tail off there with the Warriors, considering they had a big game 1 win there on Sunday night. But the key story in this game is Jimmy Butler, who got undercut by Amen Thompson, who went crashing to the Toyota Center floor and had to leave the game. MRI, who knows what's happening there, whether it's a back issue, a tailbone, and that is a huge loss. And who would have thought that a huge loss in the first round between the Warriors and the Rockets would not include Steph Curry, because you would think that if Curry would be gone, then you would absolutely think that they have no shot to win. But considering what Butler has given them since the trade from Miami to Golden State, and how he's just been that calm, that collected presence that maybe was missing in a championship locker room, and not that they've won a championship, but you know, with Draymond Green and Steph Curry, Kevon Looney, Moses Moody, guys who've been around the block when it comes to winning is concerned, that with Butler being now in the Bay Area and having an impact on that team that a lot of people really didn't think or even expect, considering that Butler wore out his welcome in Miami. But now you have to wonder whether or not his status moving forward is going to be a big giant question mark. Now, they won't play game 3, I believe, until Saturday, and we'll look at the schedule in a little bit. But to me, the big story out of those series, and we can talk about Minnesota, LA, which we'll touch on, but I would think if you're a Knicks fan right now, and with a game 3 tonight in Detroit, you have to be not even just concerned. I would think you'd have to be worried. And the reason why I say that is because in this series, granted that it's tied at 1 apiece, but let's face it, you guys have been outplayed, other than maybe, a 6 to 8 minute stretch in the fourth quarter in game 1, when you had that 21-0 run. If it wasn't for that, and I understand you can't take it away from them, but take that away as of right this moment, and they'd be down 0-2 in the series. And as it is, there's been a lot of chirping, especially after the loss there Monday night, where the Knicks had to come from behind again, and they fell short. They cut it to within 94-92 before Dennis Schroeder hit the biggest shot there, that 3 to make it 97-92, and that iced the game. And for all that has transpired since then, you would think that the sky is falling in Manhattan or even in the tri-state area for that matter, because whether it's Jalen Brunson taking too many shots and a lot of ISO and dribbling, and he did not shoot well, although he did play well there the other night in that loss in game 2. But between that and then also Tom Thibodeau wearing his players out, giving them too many minutes, not having much of a bench to rely on, and thinking that he could possibly be fired at the end of the series if they do not make it out alive, and all of the talk, and this is New York media for you, but it is still now a 5-game series when you think about it, where the home court is now in the favor of the Pistons. But even with all that being said, the two things that I would worry about with the Knicks fan, and even with the Knicks for that matter, are A, the Pistons are not afraid of the Knicks, because you've seen what they've done here in these 2 games where they've dominated pretty much other than that 6 to 8 minute stretch. And then on top of that, for what it's worth, they did have a 3-1 season series advantage over the Knicks, which shows you that obviously they could play with them. And yeah, why would they even back down, especially at this point, considering that they have had success against them here throughout the course of the regular season and then these first 2 games of the playoffs. And then now the second thing, and I think this is even bigger. Now we could talk about Mikal Bridges, a guy that they traded 5 first-round picks, which when you think about it is just unfathomable. And then on a lesser degree, where the Lakers, when they brought in Luka Doncic from Dallas, how the Mavericks only got a 2029 protected first-round pick. And really, let's face it, I understand Anthony Davis, but they got nothing for him. But then here's the Nets getting 5 first-round picks and 4 unprotected. But to me, the bigger thing is Karl Anthony Towns. And I talked about this. You'd have to go back to the February 10th, the day after the Super Bowl, where I talked about Karl Anthony Towns. And I said then, check those receipts, where if Karl Anthony Towns is going to have a bad April, May, or dare I even say June, the spotlight is going to be on him. And I think the spotlight is already going to be on him right here, because when you look at what he did in game 2, where he was 5 for 11, what did he have, 11 points and 6 rebounds? And I get it. People could say, well, Jalen Brunson didn't give him the ball, and I believe he only took 1 shot in the 4th quarter, and certainly was not effective in the offensive game plan or even in the offensive side of the court for the Knicks in that game 2. But part of it is that he needs to ask for the ball and maybe run a couple of plays for him if you're Tom Thibodeau, and have him be effective in that low block to where he can take advantage of a young front court by the Pistons and therefore make his way around the basket or to the basket to where he can get those points. And we know he's going to play the perimeter from times and take threes, but he was a non-factor in this game. And you brought in this guy to be the 1A or the Robin to Brunson's Batman. And what he showed you here in that game 2 was the invisible man. And more performances like that from Karl Anthony Towns, he's going to hear it not only from the New York media, but from the fans. And I understand, 24 points, 11 rebounds, it was an all-star this year, etc. But that doesn't mean anything right now. He needs to step up and produce in a big way in order for the Knicks to get out of this series and quite possibly face the Celtics in the next round, who are up 2 games to love in their series against the Magic. So those are the 2 things that I would look at if I'm a Knicks fan, to wonder whether or not they're going to be able to outlast the Pistons. And it starts tonight, because the last thing they need is for the Pistons. I don't think they're going to run away with a game. Let's say a 118-101 type of game. All these games are going to be tooth and nail. They're going to be bite, scratch, and claw of that variety. But if the Pistons get out to a lead similar to what we've seen in game 1 and game 2, and with the home crowd behind them, and if the Knicks, not to say that they do not have a lot of guts or guile or comeback ability, but now they're not at home. And not to say that that Piston crowd is going to be a Philly crowd or a Boston crowd or just a rabid crowd, to say the least, but I would think they have not hosted a playoff game in forever. And now that they snapped that losing streak of, what was it, 15 straight losses in the postseason dating back to 2008, and now they could exhale a little bit and play with a little bit of house money, knowing that if they lose this game, all right, they'll be down 2-1 and there'll be some pressure going into game 4. But tonight, they're going to be flying in the Motor City. So one more time, people, the Knicks, I feel, out of all those teams, the Lakers, I think, will be fine, as they will now shift the series back to, well, not back to, but to Minneapolis. And even though the Timberwolves got the one game, but to me, there were a no-show there the other night. Wasn't inspired. The Lakers pretty much dominated that first quarter and were in control from that point out. And then you have Golden State, which they'll be heard from in this series, although Houston's now back, and you would think that they can possibly get a game in Golden State to bring it back home and take the home court back from the Warriors. And then you have a scenario where the Knicks and where they're at right now, you would have to think that out of all those teams, even Denver, I get it that they could certainly win a game in LA, despite the fact that all the momentum now, and you could even argue they could be up 2-0 in the series, the Clippers that is, over the Nuggets. But I think the team that's in the most danger are the Knicks. And let's see if they can turn it around tonight, 7 o'clock, as we'll go through the schedule in a little bit. But those are the teams that I think that are in a little bit of peril here when it comes to at 1-1. The teams that are 2-0, what is there to discuss? Cleveland behind Donovan Mitchell's 30 last night, beat the Heat in Cleveland, and now this series will go to South Beach on Saturday in a 1 o'clock game. So you have 3 games, or really 2 games in 6 days before you even get to a game 3 where the Heat will have a home game to see if they can get back in the series. Then you have Milwaukee and Indiana. I know that in some places they're trying to look at this as the new rivalry in the NBA. Can we pipe down a little bit? Yes, I get it that Damian Lillard and Tyrese Halliburton have gone back and forth, and now with Lillard back in the lineup, although not a factor there on Tuesday night, but did contribute in a very small way. What do you have, 13 points in the game? And Giannis, who's been a beast, what do they have, 35, 18, and 7, whatever those crazy numbers were. Video game-like numbers for Giannis. But the Pacers right now are the better team, obviously being up 2-0, but they have a more complete team, despite the fact they do not have that superstar player. It's not as if they have a Giannis on their team or Jokic, and I get it, maybe not a lot of teams do, but when you take a look at the land in the NBA, even the Knicks, now Jalen Brunson, he's not a superstar player. He's a very good and even borderline great player, but if you were to start a team, I get it, you could probably maybe want to pick Tyrese Halliburton or Pascal Siakam, but there are, I would think, a ton of GMs that would take Brunson before they take those two, and that's what I mean. More complete, but they don't have that one bona fide guy, star, that will close out a game or that you know is going to be a go-to guy down the stretch. So for the Pacers and Bucks, I think that series could go back to Indiana, tied at 2, but to me, Damian Lillard's going to really have to take a quantum leap here in order for them to get back in the series, because Giannis can't do everything. He's not going to be a guy, yes, he could say, get on my shoulders, get on my back, I'm going to carry you, but 35, 18, and 7, I mean, how much more can this guy do? What is he going to have to put up? 45, 25, and 12? And that would be just beyond anything that anybody could ever imagine when it comes to an NBA playoff game, when it comes to stats. But for that series, I think that's far from over, even though I think that the Pacers will probably get a game in Milwaukee, but I would not be shocked if it goes back to Indianapolis tied at 2. Then you have the Celtics and Magic. No Tatum, no problem. Jaylen Brown steps up with 36, 10, and 5. And then Kristaps Porzingis, who got knocked in the head there by Goga Bitadze, you know me with these names, people. But that actually inspired them more because the Magic have played well in the first half against the Celtics in both of these games. They had a lead in game 1. They were only down by, 3 yesterday? And for whatever the reason, the third quarter, although the Celtics started to pull away, but after that hit, that's when they really took off and they put the game away, although it was only a 9-point deficit as opposed to what you saw there in game 1. But Tatum, you wonder, it's a quick turnaround. They play Friday night. Will he return in a game 3? If I'm the Celtics, I would hold off on him. Just rest him. If it was tied at 1, then maybe I'd have to consider that. But if they lose a game 3, then you bring him back for game 4. Let him get that extra day's rest. And the good thing for the Celtics that they do play Friday night, and it's not a quick turnaround to where they have a Saturday afternoon where they're 1 at 3:30. It's a 7 o'clock game there on Sunday. So at least they have that flexibility and not have to worry about a quick turnaround, whether or not Tatum plays Friday night. But if he doesn't, he'll still have a complete amount of rest from the time he hurt his wrist on Sunday to Sunday night. So it's pretty much a whole week he'll have off. So now we got that series put aside. Oklahoma City and Memphis, really, is there anything else to discuss there? And I'm not even going to get into that series unless Memphis could get back and make it respectable. And the same for Orlando. I think Orlando could take one of the next 2. I don't know if it's going to be Friday night or Sunday. Paolo Banchero's played well, But besides that, they have not been able to provide any other threat there offensively for the Magic to keep up with the Celtics in that series. And then as far as the Grizzlies are concerned, now John Morant's going to have a monster performance, as well as Jaren Jackson as well, because there's no way, they're not going to win this series. Let's face it, they're not winning 4 of the next 5 against a team that had 68 wins in the regular season. So for that series, to me, it's over. I don't think there's anything else to really unpack or discuss there. And then the last series to get into, I believe that's all of it, right? Did I say Milwaukee, Indiana, Denver and LA? That's the one thing I hadn't discussed. Now, Kawhi Leonard, I know you hold your breath with him. Same for James Harden when it comes to being in the clutch. But the performance you saw there the other night by Kawhi Leonard is just going to show you that he could be the one player, not only just in this series, but moving forward throughout the playoffs, as the one to look out for. And the reason why I didn't bring up the Clippers, especially during my little playoff preview last Thursday, was because from one game to the next, you don't know what you're going to get with him. As you saw last year, where after game 2, I believe he played probably a bit of game 3, or maybe game 2, and I believe he scored 32 points in that game, but you didn't see him the rest of that series against the Mavericks. So I hate to say it, there is that part of me that's waiting for the shoe to drop with Leonard, although seems to be 100% healthy and he's fine and probably the best he's been since he tore that ACL in the 2021 playoffs. I believe it was in the second round against Utah. But for the Clippers and what they've shown here so far, I think that they're going to be a tough out here for the Nuggets, who, like I mentioned, they've stumbled into this postseason considering they fired Mike Malone, the GM, bringing in David Adelman. Well, he was an assistant. They didn't bring him in from the outside. And even though Denver is a team that I talked about, one of those teams that are tied at 1, can they make it out alive? I have to say, at this very moment, I think that the Clippers right now have a very good advantage, and I would not be surprised if the series goes back to Denver with the Clippers up 3-1. Now, here's the danger. The Clippers, who have had a very checkered history, and they've had 3-1 series leads and blown it, as a matter of fact, to Denver in the bubble back in 2020. So this is one team that, although it's going to be tough to count out, but they do have that history where you wonder whether or not that the black cloud is going to start to go over the Intuit Dome or over the organization to where they all of a sudden just spit the bit. And that also means, and I'm not trying to wish any ill will by any means towards Kawhi Leonard, but he is just a tweak or one step away from being on the shelf just as quick as James Harden could pull out a 36, 10, and 5 in his own right in a game 3, and then game 4 when they're up 2-1 invisible. Or worse, Denver wins a game number 3, and then in game 4 when they need Harden the most, he's nowhere to be found. So you have that to deal with, but I think Denver will get one of the next 2, although I would not be surprised if the Clippers do sweep these 2 home games and go back to Denver with a chance to close out the Nuggets. And to me, that's more of an indictment on Denver considering how they played down the stretch and really in the series, because if it wasn't for Russell Westbrook in game 1, toward the end of that game and obviously in the overtime, the Clippers would have obviously a commanding 2-0 series lead going back home and a chance to close out the Nuggets without getting on a plane to go back to the Mile High City. So you have that to deal with there if you're the Nuggets, and even with the Clippers for that matter. But other than that, that's what you have there in the NBA. And how I look at this coming weekend, I think that the Cavs will definitely get one of the next 2, if not sweep, in Miami. I think the Celtics will definitely get one of the next 2. I did say in 5, so I'm going to expect them to come back to Boston, but they will win one of the next 2 games with or without Jason Tatum. I think you're going to see a sweep, maybe a gentleman's sweep there between Oklahoma City and Memphis, because the way that the Thunder have played here in these first 2 games, they've dominated. All right, you want to give Memphis a pass? To me, I don't give them a pass considering they lost by 50 after winning that playing game there on Friday night against the Mavericks. All right, quick turnaround, whatever it was, 30 hours, but maybe even less than that, 36 hours, somewhere around there. But to get blown out by 50, as I said on Monday, all right, you lose by 20, 25, 30. That's embarrassing and that's bad to begin with, but all right, I'll give you a break. 50? No excuses there. And then you have the Milwaukee, Indiana series, like I mentioned. I think that the Bucks will definitely win one of these next two, but which one? Will they win game 3? I hope that this goes to a 5th game where they're tied at 2, but Giannis is going to have to probably do a little bit more, and Damian Lillard is really going to have to pick up from where he left off. Granted that he has not played in the last few weeks because of the blood clot issue that he had, but that's how I'm looking at this weekend. And then as far as the teams that are tied at 1, I could see the Knicks winning one of the next 2. I'd be shocked if they lose the next 2 in Detroit. I really would, and that would really be an indictment, whether it be on the coach, whether it be on Karl-Anthony Towns, as I mentioned, etc. So we'll keep an eye on that. I think the Lakers will win one of the next 2 and go back to Staples tied at 2. As I mentioned with the Cavs, I think that they'll win at least 1 to go back to Cleveland, maybe 2. They could possibly sweep the Heat there. And then finally, Golden State and Houston. I think Golden State, I just more look at Houston because Golden State will win a game. It's just a matter if the Rockets will. I think the Rockets will win a game there too, considering what they did yesterday and rebounding from that game 1 loss. Now, would I be surprised if the Rockets go in there and lose the next 2? I can't say I would, but I would think getting this win now gives them a little bit of confidence, better feel for where they're at in this series. But now they got to get that next game because they definitely need to get back to Houston tied at 2. I don't think they're going to take the next 2. It's more likely that Golden State wins 2 in their building before the Rockets will. But I see a split. I can see them going back to Houston tied at 2, and then obviously have a best of 3 at that point. And that's what you have with the NBA. Looking forward to it as far as the schedule goes for the weekend starting tonight. Knicks in Detroit. These games are on TNT, where the nightcap, Denver at LA, is on NBA TV. A little bit surprised because I would have thrown Oklahoma City and Memphis on TNT on NBA TV. Not only because it's 2-0, but really, who cares about that series? We know that the Thunder are going to win going away. Where, to me, put that Denver-LA on TNT. So I think they got robbed there. Then tomorrow, all on ESPN, Boston and Orlando at 7, Indiana, Milwaukee at 8, and then you have the Lakers in Minnesota at 9:30, and then you have the full slate of games on Saturday and Sunday, which I love. I talked about that last week. Full docket. Saturday, Cleveland at Miami at 1, Oklahoma City, Memphis at 3:30, and that's a game 4, remember, because Cleveland, Miami's game 3. Denver, LA, 6 o'clock on TNT. Those 3 games on Saturday, TNT. And then the nightcap is Houston at Golden State on ABC, your Saturday showcase, where Sunday, New York and Detroit at 1, LA at Minnesota at 3:30, both games on ABC. Boston, Orlando, TNT, Indiana, Milwaukee, TNT as well, 7 and 9:30 to go back-to-back. And then a couple of quickies before I move on to the NHL. One, do I need to spend even 60 seconds on Nico Harrison and his comments? You're damn right I do. Because for Nico Harrison to come out the other day in another press conference, okay, another one, this is never going to end with the Mavericks. He actually came out and had the, I hate to say it, balls to address that he did not know the fan base's love affair with Luka Doncic. I almost said Nico Harrison. He did not take the temperature or the pulse of the fans' affinity, admiration, adulation for Luka Doncic. You gotta be kidding. I mean, is he off into the wilderness somewhere? Is he just literally that clueless? Does he not know his team? Does he not know how important Luka? I'm sure if you went prior to February 1st, whether it's in the building at America Airlines Center or somewhere in town where I'm sure there were Luka billboards everywhere, how he came out and said that, I still don't want to believe that. I still feel like in my heart and my soul, like, is this guy a robot? Is he that just so far gone? And even more of an admittance to know that he made a mistake by not, I didn't realize. And I'm just going to leave it there because to me, that was one of the more dumb, I can't even put an adjective before that. How he was not in tune with the fan base, with the city, with just the overall feeling of how important Luka Doncic was to that community. I mean, I don't know. To me, that's like saying the Yankees trading Aaron Judge right now, and then there'd be an outcry throughout the 5 boroughs in the tri-state area, and for Brian Cashman to come out and say, oh, I didn't know how much the fans loved Aaron Judge. I mean, seriously? I'm just going to leave that there. And then lastly, the 8th episode of Celtics City, which was one that I loved. Of course, it talked about the Ubuntu, the 2008 championship year, but it also led up to that, where the stabbing of Paul Pierce coming out of that, the little bit of success that they had in the early 2000s. Now, this is post Rick Pitino sending the fax in Miami, and I remember it vividly, and I talked about this last week, and I'll just touch on it for another 90 seconds. I promise I'll move on. But for Pitino and how he went out like a chump, let's call it as we see it, faxing his resignation in the middle of the season in Miami, where he just said, I don't want to do this anymore. Terrible job, but you had the little success there, the back-to-back playoffs, making it to a conference final against the Nets and then getting swept in the conference semis the following year. And then they had the terrible year there in 06-07 where, well, first off, when Danny Ainge came in and they traded Antoine Walker for Rafe LaFrance, and that was just a terrible trade. And Ainge was the gunslinger at that time. And then in 06-07, the brutal year that they had where they lost 18 straight games. I mean, it was just as bottomed out as the organization was, and Pierce maybe looking for the exits at that point, considering he'd been with the team almost 10 years, and then obviously bringing in Ray Allen, KG, and we know what happened there, culminating in a championship. And then the 9th episode will be there on Monday, the final one, which I can't believe. I remember March 3rd when the first episode aired, and now here we are, just one episode away from it concluding. So if you haven't seen it, whether you're a Celtic fan or not, just if you're a basketball fan, definitely check it out. I certainly recommend it. All right, now let me lace up the skates to go through the National Hockey League. And now let's get to the second window here when I talked about how the intrigue in the NBA, where here in the NHL, you don't really have a lot. You have 5 series that are already 2-love. And it looks like these teams are going to go out and whimper. Whether you're the Devils, whether you're the Canadiens, and give it up, the Canadiens have actually played well. So I'll give them that. Whether you're the Ottawa Senators, whether you're the St. Louis Blues, and now last night, the Edmonton Oilers, yes, the defending Western Conference champs, all those teams are facing 0-2 deficits. Now, out of those 5 teams, do I have any faith in those teams coming back in the series and maybe even tying it to push this series to a 5th game to where it's a pivotal game 5? The only team I can look at right now is Edmonton. And Edmonton has not played well here. And think about Edmonton in game 1. They were down 5-3 with 2.5 minutes to go, and they actually scored 2 goals within less than 2 minutes, including Connor McDavid with the tying goal with about a minute to go. But what happened? 30 seconds later, you had Philip Deneau back in the net past Stuart Skinner 6-5 as the Kings win a dramatic game. And if they would have lost that game, who knows where their psyche would have been. To blow a game that late in the contest would have just been debilitating. But as it was, they won that game in, what was that? I believe Monday night, because game 1, or maybe that was Sunday. And then last night, as I pull up my NHL schedule, last night, rather comfortably, 6-2 against the Oilers, where the Kings certainly exhaled from that just near disaster there against Edmonton on Monday night. So now you have a scenario where the Kings will go to Edmonton with a 2-0 series lead. And even though, as we all know, you don't have a series until the road team wins. And if Edmonton can take care of home ice, they'll be fine. I think out of all the teams, maybe St. Louis now has run out of gas against Winnipeg. And give it up for Kyle Connor. He's been the hero of the series. Got the big goal there in game 1 when it was tied. And then Mark Scheifele, as well as Connor, had another goal there in game 2 as they were able to eke out a win over the Blues. And I think the Blues will play better at home. But considering they had that 12-game winning streak, and I believe they ended the year losing 3 in a row, now you have to wonder whether or not they got to just all of a sudden get more gas in the tank. I would think at home they'll play better and maybe win a game. Will they win 2? I don't know. I think Winnipeg, with the year that they've had, I think they'll win one of the next 2 in St. Louis and therefore push the Blues to the brink there in game 5 when the series shifts back to Edmonton. And like I said, Montreal's played well here. I think maybe they'll get a game up at the Bell Center, but I think the Capitals will take care of business similar to Winnipeg, where they'll get one of the next 2 up in Montreal. And then you have the Devils. Listen, they are right now a mass unit. They're missing their top playmaker and best player on the team in Jack Hughes, as you know. And I don't know what they're going to have left here. I think that could they win a game? I think they could. I don't know if they will. You know what? I'll give them a game, whether it be game 3, which is tomorrow night, or game 4, which will be over the weekend on Sunday. So I don't see the Devils getting out of this series or going no more than 5 at this juncture. And then lastly, the other series that I'm missing out here is Toronto and Ottawa. Now, Max Domi had the overtime goal, which I thought was huge, considering that the Maple Leafs had a big game 1, and it was a close game there. Obviously went into overtime, and you thought that maybe Ottawa could pull out a win, which I thought would have put a lot of pressure on the Maple Leafs, because then obviously with Ottawa going back home, they have not hosted a playoff game in their building in God knows how long. I believe it's been 6-7 years. And for the Senators, now they have to go back. I think they'll win a game, but I don't think they're going to win 2 games against the Maple Leafs at this point. But if they would have won that game in overtime, who knows? You'd have to wonder about the Leafs psyche. I get it. Sheldon Keefe is not the coach. It's Craig Berube. And Berube, we know, is a tough son of a gun. He won a Stanley Cup with the Blues in 2019, so he does know his way around winning and knows what buttons to push. But for the Leafs, they were able to pull it out. Like I mentioned, Max Domi, who ironically, Berube had fought his father many times back in the day when they both played against each other in the 90s. But for the Leafs, I think they'll be fine, and it should be a short series there. But now with the other 3 series, I think you have one series that actually has already played 3 games, and that's Dallas and Colorado. Now, Colorado blitzed the Stars out of the building there in game 1, and it made you think, geez, is this how the Dallas Stars like to play? They want to play from behind. Last year in that opening round series against Vegas, they were down 2-0 before they had to go back to the Sin City, and then they made it the series, and they actually won the series overall. I believe they won in 7 when it was all said and done. But for Dallas, they like to do it the hard way, and they lost just a game 1 where they were a no-show, and then they won in overtime, thanks to the heroics of Colin Blackwell. And then in Colorado, where Gabriel Landeskog, a guy who was on that Cup team in 2022, and when you think about it, the last time he was suited up and played was during that year, during that series, and because he's had this chronic knee injury, which he has not been back on the ice, and I'm sure the entire city welcoming him with open arms to the point where that would have given them a lift, but it did not, because the Stars were able to prevail in overtime to where Tyler Seguin got the goal. It was about 5 minutes into the extra session. Let me pull that up real quick. Actually, 5.5 minutes in, and that's on top of Jamie Benn getting the power play goal there halfway through the 3rd period. And even though Landeskog had 13 minutes of ice time, did not register any points or any shots for that matter, but I'm just sure that him in the lineup was certainly a boost. But it was not enough, as now the Avalanche are facing a 3-1 series deficit. I think they'll get that series tied before going back to Dallas for game 5. But I would not be shocked if Dallas wins, because Dallas is that type of team where from one game to the next, you don't know what you're getting. But at the same time, I could see them winning a game 4 and pushing the Avalanche to the brink. But I think this will be a long series. I think the Avalanche will get game 4 before going back to Dallas to resume their series on home ice, as they wrestled the home ice away from the Avalanche. And then you have Minnesota and Vegas. And boy, what a turnaround there, where the Wild, after just a dominating start, they had 4 goals within the first pretty much period and a quarter, as they jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and then they got another goal there early. Kirill Kaprizov with 2 goals in a game, and they're going to need him big time if they're going to advance and get to the next round. And then you have Matt Bondy get another goal, as he got the 2 goals there in game 1 and a loss. But for the Wild, as they'll host the next 2 games in their building, I think that's going to be a long series now, considering that they split. And I think Vegas will get one of the next 2 on the road. Could I see the Wild winning the next 2? I can't say I do. Now, I could see the Golden Knights winning a game 3, where now the pressure's on the Wild to try to get to Sin City with a split there at 2-2. But to me, when you're an underdog in a series the way the Wild are, you have to get the odd number games. Now, they were able to get a game 2, which is usually rare when you're an underdog. Usually you jump on the team early to get that game 1, and then you hope to get home ice where if you're lucky enough, you wins game 3 and 4, and then you worry about how the rest of the series will play out. But now, let's see if they get game 3 to add more pressure onto Vegas to see whether or not that they're going to be able to get back to Las Vegas, tied at 2. But I would think that the Golden Knights have a better shot of winning 2 than the Wild, but I think they'll split and go back to Vegas, split at 2 apiece. And then you have Florida and Tampa, the last series. I think that the Panthers, with the return of Matthew Tkachuk, unlike Gabriel Landeskog, and I get it, he's been on ice for 3 years, where Tkachuk had not played since February 20th, since the Four Nations face-off. And all he did was provide not only inspiration, not only grit, but almost as if the Florida Panthers were back and how much he was missed by the team over the last month and a half of the season. So now you have a scenario where Tkachuk comes back, he scores 2 goals on a power play, and the Lightning just were struck by lightning. In this case, were actually attacked by the Panthers, where they just went going away 6-2, and certainly had the Lightning and their fans head spinning. And now they face a real tough test, and dare I even say a do or die game 2, because they do not want to go back to South Florida down 0-2, because then they'll have to win 4 of the next 5. And considering the year that the Lightning have had, is Matthew Tkachuk that guy, the missing piece? And we all know how much he is of the heart, soul, even blood and guts of that team. And for a guy that was traded from Calgary to South Florida and now is looking to see if he could get to a 3rd straight Stanley Cup, since he had donned that uniform from that trade a couple of summers ago, I tell you, I don't know if there is any player in the NHL, and I understand this could be a big statement. Now, are there better players? 100%. But you really have to argue whether or not Matthew Tkachuk is the one player on that team that means more than any other team in the National Hockey League. And one more time, I'm not talking about talent. I'm not talking about playmaking ability. I'm not talking about skill. But the one guy who really means the most in that locker room when it comes to leadership, when it comes to toughness, when it comes to grit, when it comes to, yes, he does have playmaking ability. He's not blessed like Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon or guys of that ilk. But as far as just what he brings to the table, the intangibles, just everything that I mentioned, I don't think there's any player in the NHL that is more valuable, more important to their team than Matthew Tkachuk. And maybe that's not going out on a limb. I don't think it is. But I haven't heard that anywhere else. And I would think that there's a fraction of people out of South Florida that would really attest to that. So let's see how tonight's going to play out, because I believe game 2 is tonight. Yeah, we'll go through the schedule in a second. But that is going to be a big-time game tonight, and it's an early game because you have 4 games tonight. TBS, 6:30, Florida at Tampa, followed by Toronto at Ottawa at 7 on ESPN2. Vegas at Minnesota at 9 on TBS, and then Winnipeg at St. Louis, 9:30, ESPN2. So you got 4 games tonight and 3 games tomorrow. Washington and Montreal, and it's weird. They don't even have maybe that's on ESPN2 as well. It doesn't show where their games are going to be aired. Washington, Montreal at 7, LA at Edmonton at 10. No network as of yet. I don't know if that's going to be NHL Network or ESPN2, because remember, the NBA has ESPN on their primary network. You're going to have Boston, Orlando, and Minnesota and the Lakers. And then you have Carolina and New Jersey on TBS at 8 tomorrow night. Saturday and Sunday, you have the full slate of games like the NBA over the weekend. 4 games on both days. Tampa, Florida at 1, TBS. And all these games are on TBS, I believe. Yes, except for the nightcaps on Sunday, which I'll get to. Tampa, Florida, Vegas, Minnesota at 4, Toronto, Ottawa at 7, Dallas at Colorado at 9:30. And then on Sunday, Winnipeg, St. Louis at 1, Carolina, New Jersey at 3:30. And then the nightcap, 6:30 and 9:30, Washington, Montreal, LA and Edmonton, no network as of yet. So we'll have to see where those games are going to be played. And that will round out your NHL Stanley Cup scenario. Now, a few other things that I need to touch on before I move on to baseball. Number one, and this is off the ice stuff, the Islanders will not renew the contract of their GM Lou Lamoriello, which, listen, the guy's had a ballyhooed and well-decorated career dating back to his days with the Devils, as you know. Went to Toronto, drafted Austin Matthews. I guess anybody, even yours truly, could have drafted him. I believe he was 1 overall. What year that was off the top of my head? 2016, 17, somewhere around there. Maybe even before that, if I'm not mistaken. I should know that. But even with that being said, and then he came to the Islanders. We know about Barry Trotz and the success that they had when he was the coach. But after that, it's been, let's face it, they flopped. Lane Lambert wasn't the answer. Patrick Roy is now showing he may not be the answer. But I don't think it's all on the coach. And it has to do with the GM. They're not bringing in the players. And I understand injuries play a part, but you could say that for everybody else, as you didn't have Matthew Barzal for 50-some-odd games this year with his knee. And hopefully that's not going to be debilitating for him moving forward. But it's not as if they've been bringing in big-time free agents to this team where they're going to fortify their roster and contend with the other teams in their conference. No, they've been hovering around the first or second wild card over the last few years, and obviously did not make it to the postseason this year. So I'm not kicking Lou Lamoriello out the door, but I only hope that the ownership there for the Islanders, and this is for you, hear me out, that they somehow, some way get a guy to come in here, and please no Garth Snows of the world, if you remember that once upon a time, Charles Wong. We want to get a guy that is a credible, and not only that, has a resume that you could bring in here and will put some additions to this organization quick, fast, in a hurry. Now, I'm not trying to say they got to do everything in one fell swoop, but they got to start building to be not only just a respectable franchise, but a franchise that can be relevant again, because the heyday of the Islanders 40 some odd years ago, it is well in our rearview mirrors, and they need to build with what they have here. They have a goaltender that you can rely on. Yes, if somehow, some way, Matthew Barzal could come back to be anything close to what he was just a couple of years ago. Of course, they have Bo Horvat in the mix. Obviously, they traded away Brock Nelson, but you don't have that core of guys. I mean, you do have it, but not to the extent where you want to plug and play guys that are certainly going to be here for the next 4 or 5 years and to build something there out on the island. So that's number one. I had to get that off my chest. The second thing is, speaking of New York and GMs, Chris Drury, he got a multi-year extension, and this is on the heels of him firing Peter Laviolette, who they have now 3 coaches in the last 4 or 5 years. And I understand James Dolan, he's loyal to a fault. But really, what has Chris Drury done here throughout the course of his tenure to have get an extension and be the guy that's going to helm this organization over the next who knows how many years, because it is a multi-year deal. Terms were not disclosed. So for me, I mean, Chris Drury, what have you done for me lately? All right, 2 of the last 3 years prior to this year, you've gone to the conference final, but let's face it, 2 years ago against Tampa, you had a 2-0 series lead and had a 2-1 lead going into the third period before you spit the bit and got swept out from that point on. And then last year also had a 2-1 series lead after winning Game 3 in Florida, and then you got swept those final 3 games out of the postseason. So it's not as if this team has been built to win, and last year was just an abomination, even after a great start. So to me, did Drury deserve an extension? I would certainly think in my eyes he didn't, but he has 9 lives. Maybe he has a little bit of that Mike Milbury syndrome where he had 1 million lives. Remember when he was the GM of the Islanders back in the 90s? So I guess Chris Drury is safe here for a while. If you're a Ranger fan, who knows how the Ranger fan feels, because I'm sure they're thinking, oh, we're bringing Drury back again. And remember, Drury trying to make a ton of deals here over the past year, whether it was Jacob Trouba, Kapakako, and a bunch of others, as he tried to do whatever it took to get reinforcements on his roster, and they still fell short of the playoffs. So if you ask me, that in itself, out on your ear. And speaking of guys that are out, the Seattle Kraken, could you give Dan Bylsma more than a year? And not that I know their roster inside out, upside down, but Bylsma, who does have a track record, won a cup there in the 08-09 season with the Penguins, and is a guy that got 1 year with Seattle after they fired their guy, was it Jacob Hochstahl, after 3 years of existence in their organization when he made it to the playoffs, 2 years ago, and then the other 2 years did not qualify for the postseason. So now Hackstall's out. You bring in Bylsma. All right, here's a guy that's won a cup. All right, one and done there. Makes you wonder, Ron Francis, who is the guy that overlooks everything, I don't know if that's coming from the owners or if it is all on Ron Francis, but boy, quick triggers there in Seattle, which does not mean for in-house stability when it comes to their organization, their coaches, etc. So they have to deal with that. And thankfully, I'm not a Kraken fan. Not to say that being an Islander fan is that much better, but you know where I'm coming from. All right, well, that'll do it with the hockey. Now let's turn our attention as I get in the batter's box to talk a little baseball. And I don't even know what to tell you people. As I sit here in front of this microphone and I'm about to look into this camera, and as I see here, there's an issue with one of their players, and that I'm referring to the New York Mets. As I said in my baseball preview, hot start, cold start, it didn't matter. Not that I wanted the Mets to get off to a cold start by any stretch, but we all know what happened 2 years ago when the Mets were 14-7 out of the gate, and then they went belly up by the time he got to the All-Star break. And then last year, we all know the 24-35 start, June 2nd, and you think, oh, geez, Carlos Mendoza over his head. This team is already going to be swept out to sea. Another All-Star break where they're probably going to have to be sellers than buyers. And even as it was last year during the trade deadline, you kind of thought, oh, the Mets in it? Are they going to hang around? Because even at that point, it wasn't guaranteed that they were going to make it to the postseason. But as it was, as we know, they did. They went on a run, Game 6 in the NLCS, and away we go. And now you have, today makes 4 weeks into the baseball season. The Mets are currently in the middle of a 7-game winning streak. They swept the Cardinals over the weekend. On Monday, I came on here and I talked about how this team, in their hot start, is it legit? Or do you have to put an asterisk next to it, considering that they've really beaten nobody? They played the Marlins twice, beat them 4 out of 6. They beat the Athletics, beat them 2 out of 3. They beat the Blue Jays, swept them out of Citi Field, that opening series of the year at home. And we could talk about all these series. They lost 2 out of 3 in Minnesota, which is a surprise because Minnesota's played horribly. And then they did lose 2 out of 3 in Houston to start the year. But this team, now, after all that, recently a 7-game winning streak. Now with this asterisk, well, let me say 4 games coming into the Phillies series. And the Phillies, they've been up and down. They have not been hot, but they are in second place in the NL East. And what did the Mets do? The Mets dispose of them. So now I guess I have to take that asterisk out. So here we have it on April 24th. 7-game winning streak. They've actually won 15 of their last 19 games. They are 12-1 at home. And as of right this very second, based on their record, they are the best team in baseball. Now, granted, you do not give out trophies for being the best team in baseball at any point. You only get the one trophy late October, maybe even into early November. And we still have miles to go until we get there. But I have to say, I am beyond surprised by how this team has started. More so based on their pitching. Whether it's Griffin Canning, who I killed, and I handheld high in the air. You know how much I killed that signing. Considering his career record and the Mets looking into the basement bargain bin to pull out a pitcher. Because Frankie Montas, who still hasn't suited up and has the same record and same ERA that I do here in 2025, and I don't even pitch, which is zeros across the board. And for Kodai Senga, who has been phenomenal, kudos to him. Dave Peterson with a good start there yesterday. Clay Holmes, all right. A couple of shaky moments, but he stemmed the tide and has pitched well. And this is without Sean Manaea, who has not pitched yet. And the aforementioned Montas. And this team is 18-7. And it begs the question, can this 7-game winning streak continue? And guess what? The answer is actually yes. Now they're going up against a young upstart team who I picked at the beginning of the year as a surprise team in baseball. Not to say that they were going to be a playoff team, not to say that they were going to be in the mix come late September for a wild card, but a team that is going to be on the rise. They go to the nation's capital this weekend for 4 games in a wraparound 4-game series starting tomorrow night. So they're going to play tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, and even Monday before they come home for a brief series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, can they go into Washington and sweep them? I don't think they're going to do that. I would like to be greedy and say 3 out of 4. You take a split because you know the Mets are going to cool off at some point. but they have played so well and they've pitched well over the moon that I'd be shocked if they don't win 3 out of 4. Can you even imagine me saying that coming out of my mouth? Now listen, they could cool off at any moment, and the Nationals, I'm sure they're going to try to measure themselves. It's the first time they're going to play each other this year as division rivals, so to speak. So listen, I would think the Mets, would I settle for a split? I wouldn't settle for it, but I'd take it considering that they're going to cool off at some point. But I would hope for 3 out of 4, keep winning series, that's all you want. And then you go in the next week, Monday, the next time we reconvene, and we'll see where they're at. But I can't stress enough by how much and how well this team has played. As evidenced by yesterday, they had a 2-0 lead on the Brett Beatty homer. They got 2 runs in the 4th. Game went to extra innings, and then the Phillies got a run in the 10th before the Mets. Alonso doubled in a run. And then Marte got the game-winning hit on a flare into center field. And again, 7 in a row, 18-7. I mean, what more can you say if you're a Met fan? You're riding high and you're feeling good. But again, I have to pump the brakes. It's April 24th. It's not May 24th. It's not July 24th. And it's certainly not September 24th. So you can feel good about the team. I know I do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that. And in some corners, I've actually heard, oh, the Mets could run away with this NL East. They're already 5 up on the Phillies. Time out. Can I bring back a little bit of history here, people? Just like I brought up the hot start last year or 2 years ago and the woeful start last year, and we know how those seasons ended. What happened in 2022 when there were 10.5 games on June 1st over the Braves? How did that season end out? Especially in the regular season when they had been in first place pretty much from day one. And they spit it up in the next to last series of the year against the Braves when they got swept, and then they had to play the Padres in their wild card round, and the rest is history. So, all has to be tempered with that. But now there's some concern here with Edwin Diaz, who pitched in the 9th and even in the 10th inning yesterday, and he has this hip issue, although it says right now he's good. Felt some discomfort, said splashing a bit of cold water on an otherwise festive conclusion. Yeah, obviously with the scenario regarding Diaz, because they're going to need him. And I believe, let's see, right now it looks like it's a cramp. Closer wasn't scheduled for further testing. Day off today, which is huge, so at least he can recoup then, and then let's see what happens there as he goes into the series in Washington tomorrow. But he says he feels strong. He's going to do some work on his hip, and he felt better afterward. Let's see how it feels on Friday. And again, another thing, the Met bullpen has been lights out. They lead the league in ERA. I mean, what? I've killed this pitching staff before they even threw a pitch this year, and look what they've done. But again, one more time, it is April 24th. What else do we have in the rest of the sport? Nothing really else to really dive into or discuss, because what we have here when it comes to the parity, as I joked about last week in Major League Baseball, I understand you have teams that have been flailing. We're not going to talk about the Rockies. We're not going to talk about the Orioles, 9-14. Now, granted that they are just a few games behind, whether it be the Jays or the Red Sox in the division. They're only 5 back of the Yankees overall and 4 in the loss, so it's not as if their season's out to sea. But with the White Sox, with the Rockies, teams like that we certainly won't get into. We know about the NL West. But everything is pretty much status quo. The Mets have been the story. And I wish I could say, oh, this team certainly has played better. I know the Astros we could talk about a little bit, as they're now over 500 at 13-11 in what looks like could be a competitive AL West. But everything else is pretty much the same. Maybe the Royals, now they won 2 in a row. They were 8-14. Let's see if they could conclude a series where I believe this afternoon against the in fact, yeah, to play the Rockies. I would think in a double dip, considering that they were postponed yesterday, and we know the Rockies have the worst record in the sport, 4-19, even though the White Sox are 5-19. And that'll be interesting to see when those two teams will play, because that would be like the World Series of futility between the Rockies and White Sox. But there really isn't anything else to get into when it comes to what's happening in Major League Baseball. Let's see. Now, you have Corey Seager going on the IL with a hamstring strain, so that's something to keep in mind. And Blake Snell had to pause throwing after discomfort. We understand he has his issues with it. I believe it's his shoulder. I don't think it's an elbow issue. So baseball right now, just kind of floating in and out at the moment. But let's see. As far as the schedule for the remainder of the day and weekend, White Sox and Minnesota, how have they done so far? To me, those are series that don't even matter. Colorado at Kansas City to close out their series, and they should do a double dip. Yeah, 2-10 and 5-10, like I mentioned. The Beltway series with the Orioles and Nationals. Tampa, Arizona. Yeah, you don't really have anything today. Milwaukee, San Francisco. Now, they closed out a series there where the Brewers and Giants, that's a 3:45 game. I believe they split the first two games of their series. Let me just double check that. Well, as a matter of fact, they're playing a 4-game series, so my apologies there. The Giants have won 2 of the first 3, so the closeout will be today. Let's see if the Brewers will get a split and lead the Bay Area with that. But for the weekend, the big games of note, Phillies in Chicago to play the Cubs, Baltimore at Detroit there tomorrow night, Blue Jays in New York to play the Yanks, Boston at Cleveland, all right, Houston at KC, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Atlanta, Arizona, Tampa Bay, San Diego, Chicago at the Athletics, Pittsburgh at LA, Texas, San Francisco. That is pretty much your schedule. Not really a series to hang your hat on that you can say, ooh, that's a series we got to keep an eye on. And that is your baseball there in a, maybe not a big giant nutshell, but just in a nutshell overall. Now let's get to the football as I close things out. And I'm sorry, people. I do not have a mock draft. I do not get into what's going to happen here in the opening round as far as, and as it is, let me just come out and say it. For yours truly. And I'm not saying this, I mean this 100%. This is not to knock the Shield, the NFL, etc. But has there not been any buzz other than Shedeur Sanders and where he's going to go here in this draft? Even if you're the biggest draft nut or geek, and yes, we can talk about, this team may trade, or, this guy is a sleeper, and so on and so forth. The sleepers aren't in the first round, people. And the first round obviously begins tonight in Green Bay. The sleepers are the ones that are the 3rd, 4th, and beyond. And if you want to say second round is not really a sleeper because you can get good value there at the second round. It's what you get from the 3rd round down. Whether you get a guy that was good in the combine but certainly did not show up, I don't want to say show up, but did not have a big regular season, or a guy that, yes, has moved up the draft boards, but to a point where he plays at a small school, so there isn't really a sample size of him playing against big-time competition. I don't want to hear about a guy that is a borderline first-round pick that is in the second round. That's not a sleeper. And with this draft, we know it's not quarterback-driven, and we understand that quarterbacks are the ones that stir the straw of the drink throughout the course of the league. And for this first round, we know Cam Ward, in all likelihood, is going to go to Tennessee. And then you have Jackson Dart. I know you have the kid from Louisville that obviously has made his way up the draft board. And listen, is he going to be a number 1 pick or even a 2? He could be a guy that is not necessarily a sleeper because his name's been thrown around a lot. What's his name? Tommy Shuck? I believe Tommy Shuck is his name. Or Shaw. But I don't think, besides that, there isn't a guy or guys that here in the opening night of the draft that I'm going to be wowed over, that I have to be glued to the set tonight. I'm watching Knicks Pistons. There's no way that I'm going to be, I got to see what's happening with the draft. I have my eye on it. I'll go back and forth, but there has been just little to no buzz, as evidenced by usually you'll get a trade rumor or a trade or two leading up to the draft. Now, you've had a couple of signings here with Kirby Joseph, now is the highest paid safety in NFL history, for $86 million. But you haven't had a myriad of trade talk, rumors, scuttlebutt, anything of the like. And you may get that tonight if teams are going to try to move up or try to go drop down. But even if you're the biggest draftnik, it's not a thing where you could forecast that or predict that this is what's going to happen here over the course of the next, or not next, but over the course of 3.5, 4 hours tonight, when it's going to be aired there on ABC, ESPN, and all the major networks there that will host the draft, NFL Network, etc. So, I'm sorry. Years past, I could say, oh, wow, this team can move up, or this team can move back, or, yeah, they want to trade to see if they could get this quarterback, or, wow, they're looking forward to maybe getting this pass rusher, so this team's going to go from 9 to 3. You haven't heard any of that. And even though the other day you heard all the Browns and Giants are in discussions for maybe moving up, or, okay, but nothing has happened. And we understand that the Giants, they're on the clock. They got to make a big impact here to save the GM, Joe Shane, and the head coach, Brian Daboll, as this could be their last season. And who knows if a quarterback will fall to them in the second round, in that early part of the second round, as they're going to draft very high. And Shedeur Sanders, I get it that he is the one guy that is the lightning rod. If it wasn't for him, this would be a snooze fest of a first round, because with the way it has transpired, and I talked about this a little bit on Monday and even more so last week, where which team in the first round is going to draft Shedeur Sanders. Now, he could probably go at 9 with the Saints because of the unlikelihood at this very moment of Derek Carr sitting up under center or standing under center come week 1, where he has a shoulder injury that who knows what his status is going to be moving forward. And with the Browns and Giants, I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback, considering that they brought in quarterbacks this year. Browns, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett. Giants, Russell Wilson, and Jameis Winston. And what, they're going to bring in another quarterback that there's going to have to sit for 1 year? In this case, Sanders? I don't think so. And all the other teams that pretty much run from 3 on down. Obviously, the Jets aren't going to pick a quarterback. The Jaguars aren't going to pick a quarterback. You have all these teams that literally from 4 down, I know I said 3, they're not going to select anybody. New England, the Raiders, they just brought in Geno Smith. The Panthers have Bryce Young. Then after the Saints, Bears, Niners, Cowboys, Dolphins, Colts. They brought in Daniel Jones to fight it out with Anthony Richardson. Falcons, we know about Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins. The Cardinals, Bengals, Seahawks, Sam Darnold. Tampa, Denver, Bo Nix. Then you have 21. And now, here's where the big question lies, as yours truly being a huge Steeler fan. If Shedeur Sanders is there at 21, do you draft him? I hate to say it. Now, I haven't watched a ton of Colorado games, and I know that he's been good at the collegiate level, and he's not going up against Northern Colorado. If he was to get drafted by the Steelers here, come tonight, if he's there at 21, and you heard Tomlin, he raved about Sanders, his ability, his way to read defenses, and even though the knock is that he took a ton of sacks, a lot of that has to do with Colorado not having a stout offensive line. So you know what? All right, maybe a lot of those sacks aren't all on him, considering that he's holding the ball a little bit too long and wanting to make a play. All right, fine. I'll give Sanders a pass on that, considering if he was to be drafted by the Steelers, he's going to have a pretty good offensive line, and it's still gelling, considering that the guys that they got here over the last few years have been through the draft. And Mason McCormick, who knows about Troy Fatanu? Hopefully he comes back. He suffered that knee injury in week 1 and obviously had not come back since. So guys like that hopefully will come back and they'll be able to be cohesive and be a unit that will keep Sanders upright if they do happen to draft Sanders. But they have to do something. They can't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to come out of retirement or wait for his answer in order to bring back Rodgers in the building and then have Sanders. I think they have to make this move. It's going to be probably an unfavorable move based on some of the things that I've read, or more so heard than read, as far as Steelers fans wanting to draft Sanders, because obviously you're going to have his father, although not with him 24/7 because he has his own issues to deal with, being the head coach of the Buffaloes there in Boulder. But, right, Deion Sanders, or maybe anybody in the Sanders family, is not really in the mold of the fabric of the community in the Steel City. So that's the only thing that I could base it on, based on what I've heard. But they need a quarterback. And if Sanders is there, they're going to have to draft him. And you can only keep your fingers, toes, and eyes crossed whether or not he's going to be successful. So he's going to have players to throw to, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth. Now, and an offensive line that is still growing, so they have no choice. They're going to have to take him. Now, if they take Jackson Dart over him, that is going to be an indictment on Sanders big time, and maybe even a bluff by Tomlin and company. But where does Sanders go? To me, that is the storyline of the draft. That is it, or at least of the opening round, because once he gets drafted, then that's it. But besides that, people, there isn't any other juicy storylines. I don't want to hear, oh, this team has a need, that team. Every team has needs. So we could talk about it till we're blue in the face on, oh, what team needs this? What team needs that? Oh, I hope this player falls down to that team. Oh, I hope that. We all hope. But again, it's not as if you have that player that's on a meteoric rise through the draft, or you have that uber talented player that has had a checkered off the field type of tenure in college. Whether it was Warren Sapp many moons ago when he dropped down, what was it, to 10 to Tampa, where we knew that he was literally a top 3 pick. Or Randy Moss when he dropped down in the draft because of his off the field issues at Marshall, and where he went 22nd, and we know what he did in mapping out a Hall of Fame career on several teams, mainly for the Minnesota Vikings. And you don't have that type of player in this draft, or players, or a guy that has just a ton of talent but has suffered a bunch of injuries, or had a key injury that was going to debilitate him to the point where he was going to be a high-risk, high-reward guy, like DK Metcalf coming out of college. A lot of people thought that, oh, he had this injury where, oh, I don't know, the talent is there, the body, etc., but I don't know if I can trust his health. And obviously he's put forth a very good career to date. There isn't really not a lot of guys that are like that. And that's why, to me, this draft is rather ho-hum, which for the NFL, hey, they could plug it all they want. And listen, we understand that they could draft me this year and they'd still get a big rating, and they'll still get whatever, how many thousands, tens of thousands of people out there in Green Bay to show up for this thing. Because as you all know now, the show is taken on the road, Chicago, Philadelphia, it's all over the place now. It's not in Radio City as it used to be once upon a time, and I kind of wish it went back to that way. But we know the NFL, they do not have enough money to burn, so they're just going to have the draft come to your town, and away we go. But that's what you have. I'm not going to get into second, third, fourth rounds. We'll recap it on Monday. We'll talk about teams and what they did and how far they could possibly go. And you know, I've never been a winner and losers type of guy when it comes to grading these drafts, but you know that I will touch on it there come Monday when the weekend is concluded. And that will conclude this podcast, people. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of life called sports. And if you haven't done so, people, as you know, please subscribe, rate, review, like, leave a comment on Apple, Spotify, the website, JAYREELZ.com, of course, the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. As I continue to try to pump that out there, I've had a little bit of an increase over the last few days. My latest vlog for the Knicks fan out there, taking the temperature, the expectation of the Knicks fan into this postseason. As I talked about earlier, I'd be a little worried if I were them. But please check that out. As I posted that up on Tuesday, very interesting 27-minute video. And you got some great responses, some honest responses, and maybe even some bold predictions. So you definitely want to check that out on my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Again, subscribe. I'm trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark. I'm still about 380-ish, less than that away. So please, if you could do your part, I would sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart. And again, if you don't know, now you know. I'm doing this full-time, people, and I'm still trying to generate some revenue, some income here. And it's been slim pickings. And I understand there's a lot more work to do other than producing, recording, editing these podcasts. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that I'm doing as an independent, a one-man band, doing all this. So your participation, your assistance is greatly needed. Take screenshots. Send it to your friends, family, foes, frenemies, whether they're good sports fans, great sports fans, diehard sports fans, casual sports fans, it doesn't matter. Take a screenshot, send it to me on my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. Then you have Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. Please, your help is vital to the success of this endeavor, this podcast, my channel, where I have some lifestyle content and other content. So please, if you could do that one more time, I thank you twice, more than once. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following, the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com, the old-fashioned way. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. This is why I quit my job to do this full time, because it puts wind in my sails. It gives me nothing but passion. This is my purpose in life, to share my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis with nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury. As long as I'm in front of this microphone and camera, twice a week, live streams every Wednesday, a lot more content coming down the pike with critique videos, with other lifestyle vlogs, sports vlogs, etc. on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.